Welcome to another episode of Game Changers for Government Contractors. And today I have a very special guest, a longtime friend, client. I don't know what else to list you as, Starla, but you fall under every category of people I just love in this world. So without me giving a whole lot about you, why don't you tell folks a little bit about who you are and what lead training does?
Well, thank you, Mike. Sure. And I feel the same about you too. Starla Halcomb, and I've been in government contracting now as an entrepreneur since 2016. So I say that because prior to that, I was working at the university, at Oklahoma State University, on faculty, and I was actually bought out, my time was bought out on a government contract. And so while I didn't have anything really to do with any of the logistics behind the scenes, I was providing the services for the Army. And I did that for about 12 years. And so I would hear things that were government contract speak and, F&A and overhead and, wrap rates and things that I had no idea what they were and didn't need to
Yeah.
know because I was just providing the service. And so fast forward probably about 5 years after that was over, I was doing my faculty job and I was contacted by a gentleman that I had worked with at that Army installation. And he had moved to Department of Transportation. He said, "Hey, Starla, remember what you used to do for us back at the Army? I'm at Transportation now. I have a national training center. Do you think you could help us do the same things there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And those things that I helped with were basically helping them with their curriculum, aligning their curriculum, helping them with their instructors, taking a subject matter expert and helping teach them the skill set to become a facilitator. They knew the content, but being a facilitator and trying to conduct functional training is another skill set as well. And so training those folks for that. So that was really how lead training was born back in 2016, was in order to help someone that I had worked with before. So I didn't really get in a real traditional way. I didn't have a lot of the startup and the angst and the growing a business. For me, that came later. I kind of had
Mm.
the upside down experience of that. And so, most people don't start a company and walk in and have a government contract, right off the bat like that. And so I totally understand that and appreciate my learning in that area. That learning curve happened after the pandemic, and
Mm.
so kind of really we grew, and then the pandemic hit, and then we really pretty much started over. And then I got to understand what it's like to really
Yeah.
start a business and start from scratch. So
Yeah. There's actually a lot of people, uh, I wouldn't say a huge percentage, but there's a lot of people that I've run into that is how they got their start. Is someone contacted them, gave them a contract basically, and they started working on it. And then the challenge became the second contract. Like, how do I
mhm,
repeat this? Because this just got handed to me. How do I repeat this? And they
mhm,
can't figure that out. And when that contract goes away, they typically wind up going and getting another job or
right.
something along those lines. What do you feel like were your biggest challenges early on? Like, you're working on a new contract, but then you're also trying to grow. What,
Mhm.
what were those challenges like?
Well, for me, those challenges really were just growing that one contract. Exactly to your point, I didn't have the foresight to know I did not need all my eggs in one basket. All my
Mm.
eggs were in one basket. And I just didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. So a lot of the challenges early on were just figuring out how to run a business. I knew how to do the work. I'd done the work my whole career, workplace training, adult learning. It's what I'd done all since I got out of college. What I'd not ever done was run a business. And so,
Mm.
honestly, growing the business really was just growing that contract is really
Yeah.
what we were doing. And that was really what led to then when the pandemic happened and all of our eggs were in one basket, and it was an on-site in-person training center that then was no longer an on-site in-person training center. That was when then I had to learn and figure out, you've got to really run this business, and you've got to make sure you've got more than one agency, have some industry work, have some, civilian and some DoD work. Try to identify, based on training from you, which I was thankfully able to find you in there in that angst period. But to learn that you really have to figure out who buys what you sell, and then that's who you really need to kind of have your focus agencies that you can really try to target. Doesn't mean you don't do anything for someone else if that connection happens, but it does help to know who buys what you sell, and then to really focus in on those agencies and grow the civilian fed agencies as well as DoD, and that's really what we do right now. We're probably about 65-70% federal, and the remainder industry, a little bit of higher ed.
Nice. What do you think helped you, like from a personal, mental sanity perspective, like weather that storm that you went through? Because when we went into the pandemic, things kind of shrinking back and the uncertainty of all that, what helped you stay in the game? Because I think a lot of people, that's where they fold shop and just go away. It is like, this is too hard, and they move on. But you were definitely committed to a different outcome. Was there anything particular that helped you stay in the game?
It might have been a couple of things if I think about it. One was the people that were on my team, that we all worked together. I felt a huge responsibility for that. And my goal of, it would be fine if I just said, I don't want to do this anymore and I need to go find a job. But what about those 6 other people? That's not as easy for all of them as well to do.
Right.
And so I think that was a little bit of my motivation. Part of it's maybe my personality too, of, I kind of am I don't like to fail. I definitely do. And I try to make sure I learn my lessons, which I feel like I have some of them. I'm sure there's still some more to come, but I definitely feel like I've learned some of those lessons. But I don't have really much of a give up fight. And
Yeah.
so I really realized that I enjoyed doing the work. And so I think
Mm.
what helps is I'm doing something that I love. The work we do is really important to me. Workplace training, adult learning, those are all things that really matter to me. And so I think that too, that helped, that I wanted to fight to keep doing that,
Mm.
just because I really enjoyed kind of being a practitioner, boots on the ground,
Yeah.
doing that work, not just talking about it.
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome. I really do think like more people need to adapt that strategy of like, hey, I've got other people on the line here, and I'm just not a quitter, so I'm going to stay in and keep going, because anybody can keep going. I find so many that just stop, and they stop
mhm,
really short, and it's like success is right around the corner. You got all these things going
right.
on. Like, why don't you just keep going a little bit farther?
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, I see too many people that are overconfident that get in the market,
Oh,
which we're getting ready to do a podcast about that. It'll probably be out right after this one, where we're talking about how, like, I think there's a lot of bad advice in the market right now. I mean, we're recording this in late March of 25, and I see too many people telling feds that are getting laid off, "Well, go start a company." Like, they have no business
oh,
starting a company.
yeah.
Most people don't. The average person doesn't have any business starting a company, because they just don't have the mental fortitude to stick out
Yeah.
all the bad times. It's easy in the good times.
Yeah.
That's what's better. So
Mike, and to that point, I had to commit to learning how to run a business too. I acknowledged, here's what I don't know. And part of what I don't know is how to be an entrepreneur. Like, what
yeah,
are the things I need to do? And I really committed myself to finding those resources, finding that training, getting a coach that was someone that, I'd been watching you and Josh probably a little over a year before we even engaged. And I say that to say, be careful who you're listening to.
Mm.
Just exactly your point you just made.
Yeah.
There's some people that are going to tell you they can help you, but I really, we really had listened and been in a lot of webinars with you before we even engaged. And that's why I had no qualms at all about, the advice I would be getting from someone who's been there and done that.
Yeah.
And that really, I think, helped. But really figuring out how to be an entrepreneur, how to run a business, and then to realize too, you're not alone. There was a lot of
Yeah.
time, there was a lot of self-doubt in there along the way of like, well, everyone else running a business already knew that. They haven't ever had this happen, but they have. And so once you kind of find that group of people that you can talk to that are in the same boat right now, have been and are, then it really helps because you realize, okay, I can keep doing this because it is okay that I don't have every answer right this second,
Right.
because I'm committed to finding it and getting it.
Right. Well, thank you for the kind words about us. I mean, I think we're kind of along the ride, just kind of helping guide you. You are so committed to making this work. That's really the secret sauce behind a lot of it, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
I'll take any credit that that you throw my way. That's really good. But which kind of segues into this next question that I have is, I know the answer is yes to this, even though I'm asking. Did you receive any bad advice early on that you would recommend people steer clear of?
Yes, definitely. And some of that came from people that I thought were knowledgeable, and some of it just came from people that just shared their thoughts kind
Mm.
of unprovoked. So a lot of the advice of um, you've got to know everything, you've got to have every answer if you're going to run this company. That's not true. There is time, and you have the opportunity to learn what it takes to run the business. In the opposite side, not the bad advice, but some of the best advice was really the realization of I had gotten to a point where I needed to not work in the business, but I needed to
Mm.
work on the business. And that really was, I think, a turning point for me, to realize if I did want to grow this, that's what I had to do. Because up until, the pandemic, I was in the business. I was performing, I was doing work. I mean, I had a whole team, but I was, no, I had not pulled myself back and stepped back to realize I needed to be able to work on the business if I
Mm.
wanted to truly grow. Um, Other bad advice was that in dealing with your client, that they're always right and that you always do
Mm.
what they say. I'm not asking anyone to go in and try to tell people they don't know what they're talking about, but you do need to make sure you know where your boundaries are. And so,
Mm.
they will ask you to do things that maybe, you need to politely and, find a way to find the solution for them, but maybe it's not something you're able to do. And so
Right.
that kind of happened when we were so entrenched and ingrained in an agency. There were places I look back now and wish I would have pushed back a little bit,
Mm.
and said, I don't think that's our role here. Here's what we can do to support you, but that needs to be your role.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's hard to have boundaries.
mhm.
You mentioned something right at the top of there about learning that you need to work on the business instead of in it, which sounds like such basic advice, yet most people can't follow it. Like,
Yeah.
what happened in your business or in your brain that allowed you to make that switch? Like, how did you go from working so much in it to saying, nope, and I got to work on it, and actually physically making the change?
So I'll admit, and I know you know this, I wasn't great at it. It was a learning and growing process for me. There were several times I would catch myself and be like, I've gone back, I need to, um, pull back again. Really, honestly, the thing that helped the most was finding people that I could trust and
Mm.
realizing I had to let go that I had great people on our team that could handle those things, and would come to me if they needed that help. And then I could step back and really start, looking at what, I didn't even know what a pipeline was. So, like,
Yeah,
we need one of those, and those take a while to get
that's
up
right.
and running and strong. And so that was really where I needed to be spending my time. And, there were several times I had an accountability partner in uh, my chief operating officer. And, I have had asked her numerous times, tell me when I'm reverting back, help me see that if I don't see it right away. And that helps a lot too, is that I did have a really good partner in the business that could really help be those eyes for me of, I think you're getting in the weeds a little bit here. And I'd be like, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
And that was my note to, step back and reposition myself. But really, you're right, it's so simple. And I mean, it's just like, so seems basic, but it was really eye-opening for me. Just, I'd had no formal
yeah,
training. Why did you want to be an entrepreneur? I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. It just kind of happened.
yeah,
So I did nothing to prepare for it
yeah.
up before I very first started. So I kind of had to do that on the back end.
Yeah, that's the same for me. I always tell people now I'm more of the let's jump out of the plane and build a parachute on the way down kind of person. And
Mm-hmm.
hopefully we'll figure it out on the way down. But I mean, same, I didn't necessarily, I mean, I wasn't a kid going, hey, I want to start a company when I hit
Yeah.
25 or whatever age it was or anything like that, and just figure it out. And there's stuff I learn every single day and
Mm-hmm.
principles that I'm like, oh, I know you should be doing this versus that, and stuff that I still don't do.
Mm-hmm.
You're like struggle with, the balance of in and on the business and those kind of things. So
Yeah.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, I don't know how you feel about it. I think a lot of people beat themselves up
Mm-hmm.
over what they don't know, or if they aren't necessarily applying it 100%, like, oh, I only applied that 60% this week. Well, it's
Yeah.
better than 50%
Yeah.
or 40% or
I have
zero.
struggled with that a little bit, kind of that insecurity, some of that imposter syndrome. I
Yeah.
have definitely struggled with that. Things that helped were finding other people in the same boat, and then realizing, oh gosh, you are going through very similar things. Employees that don't do what they say they're going to do or aren't honest.
Yeah.
Everyone,
Or
there's not something
partners
wrong
and
with
all that
you
stuff.
that you
Yeah.
picked the wrong person. There's just people out there like that, and there's other people that are struggling with those same things. That helped to have kind of that peer group to
Yeah.
talk to. It helps having a good partner. And then I would say too, having a good coach, someone that you can, lay anything out on the line. Like, there's no barriers to what I can share with
It's a
you
safe
as my
space.
coach. You're a safe space. There's a cone of silence.
Yeah. The
So
cone of silence. Nobody's going
yeah.
to find out about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can just really talk about even the things that are your fears, because it's scary to talk to the people that are on your team and them to think, does she not know
Yeah.
what she's doing? And she's driving our train and we're getting ready to go
Right.
off a cliff,
Right.
so,
And there's a boundary there too, because I know your sidekick very, very well, but other than that sidekick, the other people on the team, if they see that fear, they see that lack of knowledge, they get too close to you.
mhm,
And there's, not going all biblical on it, but there's this one verse in the Bible that talks about a prophet is without honor in his hometown.
mhm,
And that one has always stuck to me. I saw John Bevere do a session on that. It was called Honor's Reward or something like that. And he was talking about how when you don't have those boundaries between you and the people that you work with, they start to like lower the value on you and that honor that they
mhm,
would give you, because you've gone from being someone they respect to now they not only they knew you were broken before, but now they see it.
mhm.
They see where you're broken and you're not perfect, and you just come down from this pedestal, and so they just don't treat you with the same respect. And so that's
Mhm,
why you just can't share some of those things,
mhm.
because it's just it's too personal. You're letting them too close,
Right.
and that's a problem for the relationship. Not for everybody, because some people respect you more, but there's a handful of people on your team that won't, and so it's
And
hard to
and
do
I
that.
had that exact thing happen with kind of one of my first two employees. Um, you know, um, that exact thing happened, and it didn't end, the way I would have liked for it to have
Yeah.
ended, so,
Yeah.
and that was a lesson learned too. I had to realize people that are on our team, there's going to be hard workers, they're going to be bought in, but at the end of the day, it's just a job for them.
Yeah.
And it's
Yep.
not for me. And
Yep.
so I have
Yeah.
to remember,
Yeah.
to keep that boundary in
Yeah.
place.
But
So.
it's good. You have a great sidekick. We should probably stop saying that and say, Denise, she's such a
Mhm.
great sidekick for you to have on board. And I can't think of a better pairing
Oh,
of
yeah.
people than the two of you, the way you work together so well. But somebody that you can tell her
Mhm. Mhm.
everything, and she knows you the way you know her, and it just works
Mhm.
really beautiful. I think it's rare to have an owner of a company have a sidekick like that they can trust at that level. Normally there's always problems with the sidekick, your number two or whatever. But you guys work so beautifully together.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the ways where, at least on the outside looking in, one of the things that makes you so successful is having that person that,
Oh,
so
100%. I'm so fortunate. And I do realize how fortunate I am to have Denise, because you're exactly right. There's not a lot of people that have that,
yeah.
in a work partner. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
very fortunate.
you also have similar lives. You're both married to
Mhm.
firefighters. You've
Yeah.
both been in this space. So there's so many things that you can share that you couldn't share with somebody who didn't have a
Mhm.
similar background or
Right.
different things like that. It just takes it to another level,
Hmm.
which is awesome. So let's transition back a little bit to some more business questions here. So has your approach to winning contracts changed over time?
Oh, yeah. I think we are much more intentional. Some of that is a chicken and the egg thing, right? When you
Mm-hmm.
start, you kind of can't be, you kind of have to have your eyes open to a lot of things, when you're first starting, more so than now. I really feel like we're, able to go after work that we know we can be successful in. We're able to partner. One thing I would say, one of the biggest things I had to learn, and that I've had to tell a few folks, government contracting is a long game. You're not going to always go to a conference and meet people and walk away with 3 new contracts. Sometimes you do, but not every time. Sometimes you see those same people at the next year conference and the next year conference, and then you have an opportunity to partner together. So you just never know what those relationships are going to become for you, but they're all important and they matter. And so it's hard to measure, if what you've done was worth your time
Mm-hmm.
until maybe sometimes a year later. And then, oh, wait, there's this great opportunity and they remembered meeting us and we're going to talk about going after something together. So a lot
Yeah.
of times, those relationships are really critical, but you don't know it right away.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the other thing of people move. So we have a great relationship with a small business, liaison who's actually moved agencies, and she's kind of taken us with her, which
Nice.
is a great thing. So that's been a long-term relationship, right? Like that relationship, we've known this gal for probably about 5 years now. But that didn't happen overnight,
Right.
but now she's at a different agency. So we kind of have our foot in the door where she used to be. And now maybe we have the opportunity to kind of get our foot in the door, where she has
That's
moved
awesome.
to as well. So,
That's awesome. Yeah, to your point there, it never surprises me. It used to, but it never surprises me anymore how many times we get a new client on board and there's no analytics that show like where they came from. They didn't click on something or do something. There's no analytics. And we sit down and we talk to them and they say, well, we met you 3 years ago at this conference and we've
yeah,
been following you ever since.
yeah.
And I mean, that happens all the time. And, I was just talking to a client the other day and he was like, man, I need some better advice for networking because, man, this is just not working. And he said, ever since you gave this talk about working in the sled market, and I'm like, hold up. I just gave that less than a month ago. And you're talking about how this is not, how many networking events have you been to? Like 3 of them now. And I've got nothing to show for it. I'm like, so you're 3 weeks in and you're frustrated. I'm like, this may not be for you.
It's a long game. That goes back to it's a long game.
Yeah.
And I just realized I didn't really finish answering your question
Yeah.
about how our kind of our going after contracts has changed. I think we're much more intentional, and we now have a ramp. We're getting
Hmm.
repeat customers. We're able to, you know, have more than one project with, some of our DoD clients. We're and so I think a lot of that has been that relationship piece. I think that's where I was going with that, and I got
Yeah.
sidetracked.
Yeah.
But
No,
a
it's a
lot
good
of that
sidetrack.
has been, I think, the difference in what we're going after is really a lot. It's a lot more relational now than it was in the beginning.
Yeah.
And by the beginning, I mean the beginning when we kind of had to start over, in
Yeah.
2021, and like
Your reboot.
really, yeah, the reboot. Yes, I like that. And so it does feel like it's much more intentional. It feels like we are able to really try to leverage even relationships
Yeah.
as we're growing. So yeah, I do feel like we've matured in our pursuit process. We still have a ways, we still have lots to learn, and we'll
Yeah.
continue to grow that. But definitely feel like we're teenagers now, so we're
Yeah.
getting closer.
Maybe a little more than teenagers. I don't know.
Okay, maybe.
One of the things that I've noticed about you, I mean, because we're going on almost 4 years working together, one of the things that I've noticed is like your confidence level. Like your confidence level is just way up there. It used, and with that, like the questions have changed over time,
Mhm.
of,
Yeah.
of what you're looking at, from the basic stuff to more advanced things, but just the confidence of what you are going to chase after and what you
Mhm.
are going to pursue. And
Right.
you're more confident about winning it, and even reaching out to people, like
Mhm.
Denise or whoever,
Yeah.
picking up the phone, calling people, having those
Yeah.
conversations just like they're normal people. So I've seen that confidence level just really, really grow over time between the both of you. And I think that's one of those things is as your mindset shifts, it just allows you to operate very, very differently than people
Yeah.
that are like, oh, woe is me. And, should I
Yeah.
call this contracting officer? Should I not? I don't know what to do. You guys are just very proactive with a lot
Yeah.
of that stuff. And I think that is, no pun intended here for the show, but definitely a game changer when your confidence is
Mhm.
where it is. And the to go back to something you said multiple times about how we're not there yet or whatever, humble enough to know there's still enough to learn,
Mhm.
so that you're still coachable and you're still learning, and there's always more. Because I do see a lot of people that they just stop. Oh, I know what I need to know and I'm good. I
Yeah.
don't need to learn anything, but you guys are still hungry for that knowledge. And I think the confidence and the hunger for knowledge with humility is a really interesting, great recipe that not a lot of people have. So I think that's a really big one.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. How do you feel like, given how competitive the market is, do you have some tips for folks on how to stay competitive? I know relationship is a big one, but
Mhm.
outside of the relationship stuff, do you have some, or if there's specific ways to build that relationship?
Mhm.
How do
Yeah.
you not only communicate that, but how do you feel like you guys have stayed more and more competitive? Because you're growing, so you're
Mhm.
clearly more competitive than you were when you first started.
Right.
So,
Right. Part of it started, I think, and this was from day one. Um, our reputation is everything.
mm,
The work that goes out from our company to a team, somebody we're working with, is going to be high quality. We're going to be proud of it. If our name's on it, our name's on it. Like I don't want to ever go back and be like, whew, wish we wouldn't have done that.
yeah,
You work that was not up to par. Does not mean we have never made a mistake, but absolutely, we are always going to make sure we are delivering quality and that our reputation matters. And our reputation matters in our work we do and in how we treat people, how we treat teaming partners, how we treat our clients, how we treat the government, how we treat contracting officers. All of those things really matter. I feel like that sets a
mm,
stage for being able to move forward and to be able to become more successful, because you can't build on a sandy foundation. You've got to
right,
have that solid rock. I feel like the relationships are huge, and then really moving forward, I think um, being able to have that confidence that we've done the work and that we can do it again helps as well, and it makes you much more open to sharing that with who the potential client is. We were able to create this solution for this client. We would love to hear what your situation is and how we can customize and find the perfect solution for you as
mm,
well. It just sort of changes your messaging a little bit,
Yeah.
and how you can share what that differentiator is. What do you bring to the table? You
Yeah.
know, we're not for everyone, and that's okay. But figuring out who we are for, who we can do really great work for,
Yeah.
has really been helpful.
Oh, that's awesome. Um, Final question for you is, what advice would you give someone who's just starting out in the industry?
Keep learning. Realize that you're not the only one that didn't know it all when you started. There's been a lot of us. um, Keep learning, stay humble, and just figure out what your passion is and your goal is, and keep moving towards that. So you can get sidetracked, because there's going to be some low hanging fruit. Oh, well, that's real easy. We don't really do contracting, but we could hire someone to go in and clean a
Yeah.
building at night. That's not what we do. Don't spend your time, and it's tempting, right? Because you're wanting to get some money in.
Yeah.
What we did in those lean times, where we just took smaller contracts, but still doing what work we wanted to do. We stayed focused in our key
Mm.
verticals of what we offer. And so I feel like that's helpful. And just realize there's going to be ups and downs. It's a long game. I
Mm.
don't know any other way to say that than um, it's going to take a while. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you need to stick with it,
Yeah.
and keep on going.
Yeah. That's great advice. And, I wish, as a business coach, I wish I could, even for my own business, but for clients, I wish I could tell them where the tipping point's going to be. There's always going to be one where they're just kind of clicking along, and all of a sudden, boom, it just shoots up and everything happens for them. But there's no way of knowing, other than they just keep putting in energy. And I see people putting in a lot of energy, and like, where's the tipping point? Where's the tipping point? It hasn't happened. Is it around the corner? Is it next month? Is it next year? Is it, 2 years from now? And we just don't know where the tipping point's going to be, but there always becomes one. It becomes clear.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like, oh, now we're growing and doing things. Um, but understanding it's a long game and you just got to stick it out. That's the big thing. So I love that as a
And you're
final
right. I
point.
don't want this to be discouraging for anyone, but I felt I probably spent about 9 months to maybe a year of feeling like we were right on the verge of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it did, but we were just maintaining, we were surviving, fighting, keeping on, staying in the
Yeah.
game. And you're right. Then you feel a lift. And I'm
Yeah.
hoping now we're kind of at another place where maybe the next one's around the corner too.
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome. Yeah, because it's different levels. You start
mhm.
rising up. I would have loved to have only been in that place for a year. I felt like there was a decade and a half where I was like, I'm at the tipping point any day. And then all of a sudden, a decade and a half later, I'm like, what, when, how did that just happen behind my, like, I don't even know where this happened.
Yeah.
It just happened. And, because 2020 was a huge tipping point for us. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, our business
Yeah.
just skyrocketed in 2020,
Yeah.
and it's, kind of never looked back. But yeah, getting through that tipping point to the next level, and then you're like, okay, now I want to go to another level. And
Mhm.
how long between this one and that one? And you don't know. Is it a year? Is it a few months?
Yeah.
Is it a
Yeah.
couple of years? And then you get to the next level and the next level,
Yeah.
and stuff. And so I think high achievers love that and love just
Mhm.
accomplishing things and
Yeah.
helping customers. So all
And I
great
think
stuff.
too, when
Yeah.
that does happen, like you can look back and see, oh, stuff I did 2 years ago or stuff I did a
Yes.
year ago, that's what's paying off now.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to wait that, but you will, when it does happen, when the tip happens, you'll be
Yeah.
able to look back and see all of the things you did to get to that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So,
Because it's not like a linear math problem where you've
mhm.
seen 1 + 1 equals the result.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of stuff that's happened on the
Mhm.
left side of the equal sign. Some of it was valuable, some of it wasn't.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, when you're looking at a result you like, then you go back and go, it was really these 16 things. It
Mhm.
wasn't 1 + 1 to
Mhm.
equal this result. It was like 16 things we
Yeah.
did over the course of however much time,
Mhm.
and that resulted in this great thing. And I can't put my finger on any singular item that we did. It was like a combination of all these
Yeah.
things where
Yeah.
people are always looking for that silver bullet, and I'm like, it was probably a dozen or more things.
Mhm. I call that calculus. That's how calculus was
Calculus.
to me. It was a whole bunch of junk over here, and then it
Yeah.
equaled something finally. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it was not 1 plus 1.
I think that was the first class I ever dropped out of in high school because after 3 days, I still didn't understand anything they had said,
Hmm. Yeah,
and still don't. So
yeah,
like would have no idea like what's going on left of the equal sign, and
yeah.
is there even an equal sign? I don't even know what's going on.
Maybe there
There,
is.
there isn't even one in this class. It's so wild. But anyway, great discussion. Thank you for coming on. This was long overdue for us to sit down and have a conversation about all this stuff. And I definitely want to have you on again to maybe talk more about some instructional design things. Because I know
Oh yeah.
as we move into this new era of what's going on, I think there's a lot of people that need their training and their systems internally locked down. And
Mhm.
you guys are the perfect team to help them do that kind of stuff. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
There's a big difference in like going to school, like being in high school or college, and then workplace training. We call
Yeah.
that functional training. So,
Functional training.
absolutely.
I
I
like
can
it.
talk about that for days. So,
Yeah,
you might be
maybe
careful.
that's our next podcast. We'll tackle that one. So thank you again for
Yeah.
coming on. Thank you for just being in our life. You know, we've enjoyed working with you and Denise and the team, and you've been a joy to work with, and we just love you guys. So,
You guys too. You're definitely a part of our success story. So, thank you.
oh well, thank you. I appreciate it.